You're watching City Channel 4, your window to our community.
Welcome to our talk with Taylor Mack. I'm Jacob Yarrow. I'm the programming director for Hanshaw Auditorium here at the University of Iowa. I'd like to say a shout out to City Channel 4 for being part of this, and for Film Scene hosting us here, and for the Obermann Center for Advanced Studies for being a co-host of this whole event. Taylor Mack is in the midst of an amazing project that we're going to be presenting. I'm going to do a little commercial on Saturday night at the Mabee Theater in the theater building. We're proud to be a commissioner of one of the decades of a 24-decade history of popular music. 1846 to 1856 is where it lands at the moment. It's Walt Whitman versus Stephen Foster, big fans of the 1840. That's right, we have a major Civil War scholar in our midst here. All sorts of great connections. So it's art that I've been really thrilled with. I'm really fascinated by it, and we're so happy to have Taylor Mack here, and we're happy to have Jen Buckley to talk a little bit with him. So here we go, Jen Buckley and Taylor Mack.
Introduction number 2. Labels, Taylor Mack is wont to remind us, are for lazy critics. So I won't introduce you as a downtown artist.
Oh, thank you.
By downtown, of course, I mean downtown Manhattan, though of course we all love downtown Iowa City, thanks in part to our host Film Scene. To apply that label even provisionally would be to belie the broad scope of your exuberantly theatrical inquiry into humanity in all of its fabulous and less than fabulous varieties. Before we begin our conversation, I want to give you a sense of that scope. It's true that Judy, that's your preferred gender pronoun, was until recently best known as the creator and performer of drag / cabaret / vaudeville / pastiche shows like The Face of Liberalism, The Young Ladies of, and The Beast of Taylor Mack, which premiered in off and off-Broadway venues like Here Art Center, PS 122, and Joe's Pub. But no category, whether defined by geography, genre, or gender, could possibly contain Taylor Mack. Judy's shows have not only conquered the offs and the off-offs, the fringes, and the other festivals, but they have also extensively toured the US and Europe. As of this Saturday night, Mack's geographical range as a touring performer will encompass Iowa, fulfilling what I am sure is a lifelong ambition.
That's my first time here.
So moreover, in recent years, Mack has begun to receive much deserved recognition as a playwright. Critics, audiences, and theater makers attuned to the confluences of performance art and experimental playwriting have long known that Mack's shows are also plays. They noted that with works like 2006's Red Tide Blooming, which featured a cast of 12 human actors and puppets by MacArthur Fellow Basil Twist, Mack was extending the lineage of the theater of the ridiculous and remaking that genre according to your own distinctive dramaturgical and visual aesthetic. By 2009's The Lily's Revenge, Mack was taking on not 1 but 5 genres, including dance theater, 1 per act, in a 5-hour camp extravaganza / installation so massive and so marvelous that even the New York Times' reviewer Charles Isherwood emerged, quote, more refreshed than exhausted. More incisive commentators.
That's the worst quote ever.
I know.
I thought I'd hate it, but I guess I was okay.
Yeah. More incisive commentators, like playwright Caridad Svich, whose many achievements include the Obie Lifetime Achievement Award, took that opportunity to describe Mack as, quote, one of this country's most exciting, heroic, and disarmingly funny playwrights. As an actor, too, Mack has been reminding ever larger audiences just how broad Judy's range is. Mack followed up a much-lauded 2012 turn as Puck in Classic Stage Company's Midsummer Night's Dream with the dual role of Shente and Shuita in the Foundry Theater's breathlessly received 2013 production of The Good Person of Szechuan. Having suffered through what I hope is my lifetime allotment of dull, dutiful Brecht productions starring very good actors, I cannot overstate that achievement. Lines around the block for Bertolt Brecht. With Mack's newest play, Here, that's H-I-R, another gender pronoun, Judy has again proven capable of scripting richly rewarding roles for other very good actors. In what some critics see as an abrupt generic departure, Mack has written a family drama featuring a mother, a father, and 2 young adult children. The naturalistic set actually includes a kitchen sink into which an angry young man, a just returned war veteran, vomits repeatedly when confronted with the physical evidence of the attempts made by his once abused mother and his formerly female brother to append their oppressively heteronormative family life. Wright's Hill Tenals of the production at Playwrights Horizons just extended again. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Quote, the ideas and questions proliferate and spawn others as the curtain comes down on Christine Nielsen's pained and profound performance, on Mack's script, and on Nigel Smith's direction, a trinity of beautifully youthful experimental efforts that remind one of the freshness of the art they were all born out of so long ago. Here, not HIR, but here at UI, Mack will perform one segment of an almost impossibly ambitious durational work called The 24-Decade History of American Popular Music. In 2016, Mack plans to perform all 24 segments over 24 hours. Given that UI is the home of the Walt Whitman Quarterly Review, my English department colleagues and students are exceptionally pleased that Mack will be performing the segment titled 1846 to 1856, Walt Whitman versus Stephen Foster, songs popular near the breaking point. As a member of the English department, I'm especially looking forward to hearing you talk about the segment and about the Whitman you'll be staging for us. As a member of the Performance Studies Working Group at the Obermann Center for Advanced Studies, which so generously supported this event, I'm eager to hear your thoughts on so many other topics. Partial list. Durational performance and community, dramatic genres and the absurd realism of here, non-binary drag and the genealogy of drag and queer performance often staged or spoken of in your shows, performing in the classic plays of Shakespeare and Brecht. And speaking of Shakespeare, your recent commission by the Oregon Shakespeare Festival to, quote, translate, and we'll discuss what that means, Titus Andronicus, which is an inspired choice for the Play On initiative, and the experience of devising your neo-vaudeville show with Broadway veterans Mandy Patinkin and Susan Stroman, just for starters, some topics. But if you'll indulge me, I'd like to conclude this introduction by speaking from the heart as a native of the great state of Michigan. Having been intermittently but profoundly embarrassed to share a home state with Ted Nugent, I'm not sure I can express how deeply satisfied I am by your appropriation in the 24-decade history of his homophobic aggro anthem, Snakeskin Cowboys. In your hands, it becomes an exquisitely sweet, quote, gay junior prom ballad. I know I speak for many Michiganders when I say, oh, hell yes. Welcome to Iowa City, Taylor.
That's the best intro ever. Thank you. Wow. How nice.
So should we start with the 24-decade history
Sure.
as a project?
Sure. Well, if you come see the show, I'll probably talk a little bit about this. You might hear some repeat, but it's a lot of info, so it's useful to hear it on repeat. I am creating a 24-hour concert. It's called the A24 24-Decade History of Popular Music. It's not necessarily American music, but music that was popular here from 1776 to 2016. So a whole year that hasn't even been invented yet. And in October of 2016, we're going to do the big 24-hour concert from beginning to end, nonstop, no intermissions. But everyone's responsible for their own breaks. We're going to do, the entire show has 8 acts in it. And each act has 3 decades, so it's, and each decade is an hour, so each act is 3 hours long. But again, no intermissions. So, but I just do this so that what we're doing is we're touring the decades and the acts. And when we perform it, it's finally all put together and finished, if that's such a word. I don't tend to use that word. But when we're kind of doing the final kind of period of the 24-hour show, we're going to do it in rep for 3 weeks, all the various decades. So people can come see it over the course of 3 weeks if they want to, in 8 performances, or they could see half of it or a quarter show. But the actual 24-hour show, we're having people sign an agreement that they'll stay for the big 24 hours. Do you want, I mean, should I go into why, or do we want to just talk about it?
I think why would be helpful.
Why is
yeah.
interesting, right?
It is specifically,
Yeah.
why the durational aspect? I mean, clearly the show has worked for some time now in pieces.
Yeah.
But durationality seems to be becoming increasingly important to your work. I mean, perhaps starting with the Lily's Revenge, maybe going back further.
Yeah. Well, I would say sometimes it takes. Look, the Greeks understood that Greek plays are 90 minutes long, but they would do 4 of them all in a day. So they understood that sometimes it takes more than a 90-minute play to kick you out of your 8-hour work week, or however long they were working back then, you know? So so I'm not saying that it can't happen in a 90-minute play or in a 5-minute song or a 2-minute monologue. You could get kicked out of your routine. I mean, that is the job of art, right? To pause and have you think of things differently and take you out of your routine. But sometimes it takes a little bit longer. And so that's why duration for me, I think. But also, for this particular piece, it was about, in 1986 or 87, I went to the very first AIDS walk in San Francisco, and it was the first time. I grew up in Stockton, California, which was about 3 hours away, and it's a pretty oppressive place to grow up. It was the murder capital of America when I was growing up, and it was the 3rd highest literacy rate in the country, and it just wasn't really a pleasant place to be. And I didn't know a single out homosexual. And so the first time I ever saw an out homosexual in person was at this AIDS walk, and so it was thousands of them all at the same time. So it was a pretty profound experience for me, and it was the first time I was experiencing queer agency and queer history, queer pride, and queer community was all because of this epidemic. So the community was being torn apart, but it was also being built at the same time. And to be exposed to that dichotomy was en masse was a pretty profound experience. And so years later, I wanted to create a piece that was a metaphorical representation of that experience for me. And so I said, I need to put the audience and myself through an experience where we're deteriorating as we're experiencing the work. And as a result of that deterioration and our participation in the work, we're creating bonds. And so, and so it's not just a 24-hour long show, it's actually a 5-year long process or more, because we started this 4 years ago, and we would perform 1 decade, a workshop of a decade, and then another decade, another one, and then we might do the same decade again. And people kept coming to them because it's serial, you know. So audiences there would be a lot of repeat audience members, and people who had seen multiple decades, and they started to get to know each other, and so friendships were made. 2 people are now engaged that met at the shows 4 years ago. A couple babies have been born.
That's what I call community.
Businesses have started. So we're actually creating a tangible community out of an ephemeral art form. And so that that's part of the art and part of what I wanted to do with it. And so. And that's what we're doing. And so the idea is to come and share, that we're sharing it here for the first time, but the hope is to come back and share as much of the 24-hour show as we can. We're never going to do the 24-hour concept, but we're only going to do that once. But we have all these, you know, we have 24 hours worth of show that we can bring back, and you know, hopefully people come and they experience this very subjective history, my own personal subjective history. It's very queer. It's my own radical, very, you know, perspective on this. But that they experience that. You know, I say I grew up going to status quo institutions and learning facilities and churches and stuff, and you know, so this is me asking the audience to hang out in my church for 24 hours over many years.
Can I just say, of course, there is never not an important moment in which we need to tell alternative, inclusive American histories.
Yeah.
But here, this moment now in Iowa, the first of the nation caucus state, this seems like a pretty crucial moment.
Yeah.
Pretty crucial place to be telling alternative American histories.
Yeah, I think it's essential because we don't have it. In my public school education, not a mention of anything queer. The entire, every single year, no mention, ever once, And they mentioned Walt Whitman, but they never mentioned that he's queer. I wasn't the only queer kid in my school, so, and just because, even if I was the only one, or there weren't any, they still should be mentioning it, So a queer history has been eradicated from our education, and so it's our job to put it back in and just I think my job as a theater artist is to remind people of the things they've forgotten, dismissed, or buried, or that other people have buried for them. So I'm always just trying to unearth something, and I use objectivity and a lot of subjectivity in order to do that.
So before we move on to talking about Whitman as queer bard of American democracy, you referred to the shows as being staged by use of a plural pronoun. You said we. So can you talk a little bit about what might look like a solo performance is actually a long-term collaboration?
Yeah. Well, my loves, my family. So not everyone you will see on stage has worked with each other for multiple years. I think we've got 2 people from Iowa that are joining us. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes. We have 2 musicians from Iowa that are joining us. So there's some new. It's a little bit like a wedding. There's some blue, there's some old, there's some new. And one of the musicians just joined us last August for our first show. So she's pretty new to us. And everyone else has been working on it for about 4 years now, but the musical director and I have been working together for over almost 10 years now, and the arranger of the songs. And then my costume designer, Machine, who isn't here, but you'll see his work. We've been working for about 10 years as well. I mean, these are I think of them as my family. They're it's interesting because we had to frame this. We were writing for this grant, that was helping support us come here and stuff. And we had to frame everything like it was an ensemble. And people have they have their specific ideas about what an ensemble is, and when it starts with a lead artist, there's an assumption that it's not an ensemble, but it really is. I mean, we make the work in front of you. So we don't work traditionally in the sense where we're rehearsing every day and building the show. And instead, what we're doing is building it in front of you. The performance is our rehearsal. So everything, we have our outline, and I've memorized the songs and the poems, and then we go out there and everything changes, in front of you. So it really is the more we perform and the more the people that are in the room, that's the ensemble that we're creating. So in some ways too, and you'll see in the show that the audience is also our ensemble. So this is a brand new working collaboration here in Iowa. So the audience is brand new to us. But in New York, I mean, people, they have seen many of the decades, and also a lot of my other shows, and so they participate in a way that is almost ensemble-like. I ask them to do things and they just do it. Whereas when I come to a place that's new, I ask and I coax a little, and it's interesting.
So about Whitman.
Whitman. What about him?
I mean, so Whitman, was it Whitman's vision of American democracy, this multiplicitous nation, this inclusive vision? Is this what drew you to
I think my work
fix on Whitman as one of the figures you'll be staging for us in this show?
Yeah. Well, I think that they say that every artist, so if you look at their career, they focus in on one theme. You know, whether or not they're trying to break away from that theme or not, they always end up kind of about that. And so far, if I look back at all the work, it all really has to do with homogeneity. I mean, it has heterogeneity and homogeneity. I grew up in a place where everyone was expected to be one thing and nobody was. You know, so so that tension. I think created in me a desire to really want to understand what that is, specifically in an American culture, this desire to be one thing, one nation under one God, one type of person, you know, and here we are, we're so polarized and we're so, we are a melting pot that refuses to melt, you know, like, and so, so it's, I find the reasons and the questions about that interesting, and I also find oftentimes when we say community, where people think, oh, sweet, lovely, wonderful friends, everyone getting together and making food, and community is really awful. You know, it can be really, really awful. So I'm really interested. I make work about community, but I'm not always trying to make it sweet. You know, sometimes it's messed up, and because I want the audience to feel like they can experience the full range of who they are as both a community and as individuals, and I think that's what Whitman was interested in. So very much I'm attracted to him because of that. I mean, he was one of the first to give us that gift. You know.
Versus Foster.
Versus Foster, who was reductive. Yeah, to say the least. I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm going to talk about it in the show.
Sorry, spoilers.
But I mean, I mean, he made his life. I mean, he wrote minstrel songs for a living. He was a Northerner who wrote minstrel songs. I mean, he basically created. He didn't create the minstrel song, but he basically perpetuated it, fostered it. You know, made it grow into the world. And he's what we call the father of American song, which is true. You know, but we have to acknowledge that our fostering comes from a minstrel song, you know, from a deep-seated racism. So so that's, I find that he's a sentimentalist, and Walt Whitman was the self-proclaimed no sentimentalist. So I find that very exciting. So I wanted to put that, and Walt Whitman calls his poems songs.
Right.
So and they seem like they're populist, right? They seem, you hear them and you can pretty much kind of understand them. You don't need to reread them over and over and over again to get the meaning. You maybe want to reread them over and over again because they're delicious. But and so his goal is to reach the people. He's trying to connect to the people, and a popular songwriter is doing the same thing. So. So I thought that we could squish him into the show and justify it.
So speaking of songwriters and Whitman as singer, Whitman's poems have been set to music many times.
Yeah.
One of the most musicalized American poets, precisely for the reasons I think that you've articulated. Are you? I don't want to give away too much of the show, but are you going to join the proud tradition that includes Kurt Weill, among many others, of setting Whitman?
You know, we
to
did.
music?
When I did that, we did this show at Lincoln Center, and I commissioned a few friends to write songs, and you know, none of those have ended up staying in the piece. And it's not because they weren't good; they're beautiful songs. They did really beautiful work, but ultimately. This is a battle against Stephen Foster. So, and when I say battle, I mean it's a pastiche, really. So I was actually found myself more interested in putting Stephen Foster melodies underneath Walt Whitman poems, doing the Walt Whitman poems without any music, letting the poems just be the music, singing and interspersing them back and forth, and so that's kind of what we're doing. It's not just one song, one poem, one song, one poem. It's, you know, we use every technique available to us.
So Not to ask you to give away more of the show than you already have. I don't want us to do too many spoilers. I'm wondering if you can talk for just a moment about how this segment and the 24-decade history as a whole is similar to or different from some of the other shows you've done that you've described as subversive jukebox musicals. So a show like The Face of Liberalism, for instance.
Well, I mean, I know, because so The Face of Liberalism is all original material, and as is Cardiac. So I would do these performance art concerts that kind of have this performance art concert career, I guess. And but usually I do my own stuff. I've only done one other show that was a kind of cover show. So this feels like it's a cover show, but there's original material in this, and there's I've written a big long poem in the style of Walt Whitman that is in the show, and the 24-decade history. I'd say maybe 12 hours of it, 246 songs, but 12 of those are my own that I've written, and then there's, I'd say, good 12 hours of the show is talking. Is my own writing or outlined banter or improvised banter or scripted spoken word stuff or dialogue scenes. I mean, so it's a little. We act like it's a concert, but you get up there and then you just, you'll see. I talk a lot, and it depends on the night. Good. Sometimes, we think the show's going to be 90 minutes, and it turns into 3-hour extravaganza. It's just like it just depends on the night. It really does. I mean, I'm not joking when I say we're making it in front of you. And it depends on what the audience does, because we ask a lot of you. And we've had an example is I did a show in New York where. I was having the audience sing this particular part, or no, they were shouting things. I was having them all shout stuff, and I was singing this Irving Berlin song, and then I got everyone to quiet down, and I gave the microphone to this guy that was in the row that I was in the audience, and I thought that, and I said, and I thought he would just shout the thing that he had been shouting, but instead he thought I was asking him to sing the song. So he starts to sing the song, but he doesn't really know the melody or anything, or the lyrics. So I started encouraging him to kind of make it up. And so, because I was like, oh, you wanted to sing? Okay, so do it. So he starts making it up and singing it, and pretty soon I took my outfit on, I put it on him, and then we did this big dance, and we did a whole duet together, and this 2-minute number. It was supposed to be 2 minutes, and it turned into a 20-minute extravaganza. So and so that's the kind of thing that sometimes happens. I mean, I'm not saying it will, and it usually, that particular thing has never happened any other time, but you never know.
We can only hope.
Yeah.
So at the same time that you're developing and crafting and touring and workshopping this massively ambitious work, you're also writing here.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that play and what drew you to working in what you call absurd realism? What drew you to writing that play in that moment? Perhaps in relation to this other, like I said, impossibly ambitious project you're doing, or quite apart from it?
Well, I mean, things don't happen in the time that you plan them to happen, right? So I started writing that play 12 years ago, but it was my drawer play, so I put it in a drawer, take it out, put it in the drawer, take it out, and the American theater runs really slow. It's a slow process in America. And the performance art presenting world is fast, So, I mean, it's basically, if you want to do it, you do it. You make it happen, and then it happens. So, and depending on the project, this project is a durational project, so I knew it was going to take it 5 years to make. Here, I thought it would take a year to do, but because the American theater is so slow, it took a long time. So that's a little bit of the answer, is that you constantly, as a theater artist, you have to juggle 5 million projects all at the same time, and you just hope one of them you hope that two don't land at the same time, you know, because then you have to say no to something. So that's always part of the. Right now, I'm touring the Mandy, the show that I do with Mandy Patinkin. I'm doing this show. I got my play running in New York, and I got 2 commissions for plays. I got a play that's premiering in not this coming summer, but next summer. But that is finished. I'm about to go do a workshop on another play. Someone wrote a play for me to be in that we've been squeezing in little times. You know, I mean, that's I haven't even said everything that's going on, because the only way I have found to make a living as a theater artist is to like have my fingers in every little pot, you know. So, and because I like to do it too. But in terms of why I want to write a kitchen sink drama, I work from content dictates the form. Mm-hmm. So I think about what I wanted to write about, and I wanted to write about how an old world order is getting kind of broken apart, and the new world order is slowly coming up and taking charge. And what is our responsibility to taking care of that old world order? Do we have to take care of it at all? Do we get to discard it? And the way that I can make this a little clearer is I grew up in Stockton, California. It was this horrible place. I got out. All my wonderful, lovely queer friends all got out. You know, everyone got out. Everyone that was interesting that I knew there got out. You know, and meanwhile, and we all went to the cities. You know, and meanwhile, Stockton still has the really awful statistics. So I wonder, is it our job to help? You know, is it our job to stick around and take care of it? Or did we have to create boundaries in order to heal ourselves? And I really think that all art is about healing, and everyone gets born and we're all just trying to heal ourselves, right? So I wanted to address that specifically in a piece where the characters are all trying to heal, but one person's idea of healing is very different from another person's idea of how they can heal, and that the two sides can't really see that the other person can't heal the way they need to heal. So that I wanted to ask those questions, I wanted to address them, and I felt like the best form that would represent how a new world order is trying to break free of an old world would be the 20th century kitchen sink family drama, where you got the fourth wall. And so I wrote a play where it feels like the characters are pressed up against the fourth wall, and they really want to get out, but they can't because of some circumstances in the play. And so that's that tension in the play. So it always really is. I think about what do I want to talk about, and then I think, what's the form that's best going to represent that?
There is, of course, one moment where they pretty explicitly tried to get out. You couldn't resist putting in a shadow puppetry scene.
Yeah, we have a shadow puppetry show. And that's towards the end of the play, and it's there for a reason. It's to show the audience, look, this is what they want to make. Oh, the play's about to explode. It's going to go.
Shadow puppetry.
Yeah, pretty soon they're all going to run out into the house and do crazy things. You know, it's going to become, in the tradition of the avant-garde, it's going to break out of this, it's going to get experimental, and then it just can't. And that's one of the tragedies of the play, is that it just can't quite go there yet. Because I feel like that's where we are at a culture where we're almost into something new, and we just are getting held down by the Fox News, you know, and all that ilk, you know.
And yet the play, even as you say that, yet the play leaves almost disturbingly open the question of the extent to which progressive radicals must do what Max, the transgender character in the play, calls teaching the parents.
Yeah.
Max says at one point in the play, it's exhausting teaching her, meaning the mother.
Yeah.
And the play, I think, really leaves that question open. You know, what is it that progressive radicals must do?
Right.
At what point must we cut our losses and move on?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have the answers. I don't like to write plays that have the answers. I just try to put out what I see, and what I see is I see a lot of people creating boundaries a lot of progressive liberals creating boundaries for themselves so that they can heal, so that they can have their radical healing. And boundaries are ugly. Boundaries are vicious and can be violent and bloody and can do a lot of harm. And I don't have judgment really on that, but I do have questions about it. And I wonder, is there a way for us to have radical healing without having a bloody scene? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, yeah.
So you mentioned the work that you devised with Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah.
So that's quite different formally from here and from the 24-decade history.
Guess so.
It has been said, I think
Really
every piece that's been written about that show, every review, there's one line, usually in the lead of the review, in which the reviewer says, Taylor Mac and Mandy Patinkin.
Yeah.
Not a pairing that comes to mind immediately,
Yeah.
but clearly you two clicked as
yeah.
co-devisers of this piece.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about this? What looks to me like a Beckettian, but also like the militantly optimistic version of a Beckettian bowler-hatted tragicomedy.
Yeah. Mandy and I met at a benefit, and our friend Rachel Chopkin, who runs this theater company called The Team, and they were having a gala, and she asked me if I would perform, and I said yes, and she asked Mandy if he would perform, and he said he would only do it if we did a show together, and rather than doing our separate little numbers. And she said, do you want to do a show with Mandy? I said, yes. So we got together and we created a 30-minute little show. I assumed he'd seen me, and that's why he said that. Or I assumed that he knew something about me. He didn't know anything about me. He'd never seen a picture of me. He just trusted Rachel, and he just was like, yeah, I want to work with people, because that's the kind of person he is. He's amazing. So I go to his house, we rehearse this show, we put this, I do some of my original songs, we do some of his songs that he's sung over the years, we create this 30-minute show. And I'm kind of dressed like this when we rehearse. And then he shows up the day of the gala, and I'm in the dressing room, I'm done up in...
Your finery.
I'm my finery, yeah, I'm done up in my thing. And he's like... And we did the show, and the whole time we were working on the show, I was like, oh, this is going to be so funny, because I'm going to be dressed like this, and he'll be wearing his jeans and his t-shirt. It'll be so funny, that dichotomy, it's perfect. This is everything I imagine and dream about and love, And he's just thinking, it's going to be two guys, and we're going to have a good time. And so we do the show, and it was electric. It was really extraordinary. And so then we decided to create a show together, and we would get together. He's got a crazy busy schedule. I got a crazy busy schedule. We would get together a couple days here, a couple days there, and also with his musical director, longtime musical director Paul Ford, who's kind of a mad genius. And we, but it was taking a long time, and there was an idea that I would write something specifically for us, but that didn't seem to be right with what we wanted to do, and so eventually he said, what if we bring Susan Stroman into this? And I was like, sure. Okay. I'm going to say no. So we called up Stro, and she met with us, and we sang through what we'd created so far, and then she said, okay, great, when do we work? So we started working the next day. We got a rehearsal room, and she whipped us into shape. She's the one that really made it happen, I think. I mean, we made it happen, but she really did it. And we didn't want there to be any words, so we created a piece that we only wanted to sing. We didn't want to speak. So and we wanted it to be a vaudeville. It's called The Last Two People on Earth, an apocalyptic vaudeville. And Mandy's favorite thing, he wanted to create his favorite human being is Buster Keaton, so he just wanted to create this vaudeville his whole life, and I thought, you know what, I wanted to work with Mandy Patinkin. When I was 14 years old, I would listen to him incessantly. So when I got together with him and sang the songs at his house, I knew all his phrasing and the word changes and everything, and he was like, "Wow, our voices blend perfectly together." And I thought, yeah, because when I was 14, I trained my voice on your songs, So and then I grew up. I forgot about musical theater, and it's not something I really wanted to do. And then here I am working with with my dream at 14, and then here at 30, now 40, I was working with the two giants of the musical theater. So if I had tried to make it happen, it wouldn't have happened. But so we made this show, and I don't know. I didn't really answer your question, but that's it.
No, you have. But speaking of Buster Keaton, another great Buster Keaton fan was, of course, Samuel Beckett. I just finished teaching Waiting for Godot to a group of to a group of very confused undergraduates that are hopefully less confused now. But I'm wondering if that balance of tragicomedy is struck in a Beckettian vein in this show, or were you tending towards something a little bit more almost impossibly optimistic, given that it's actually it's clearly post-apocalyptic setting?
I'll tell you why we came up with the concept was because we sat around and we said, all right, when we tried to get really serious about it, we said, what would we do if we were the last two people on Earth? And and we thought, well, we would just get together and sing a bunch of songs for the seagulls. That's what we do for the cockroaches. We'd do a bunch of songs for the cockroaches, and we put on a vaudeville together. And so then we said, okay, well, let's just do that. So I think, clearly then it became, if you say vaudeville, then it becomes in that lineage of Waiting for Godot. So that's just what happens, everyone, and it's two people, and
there are bowler hats,
and with their bowler hats, and all all those tropes, we're working off all that stuff. But I think yes, it's a funny show, and it's also very sad, and I'm not interested in making work that doesn't show the full range of who we are as people, and I don't think any of the artists, any of the playwrights that have lasted more than 100 years have been interested in that either. I mean, this whole concept of tragedy, comedy, the Greek plays, those Greek plays have a lot of humor in them, those Greek tragedies. So this breaking up, I know it was Aristotelian, but it's like just because some academic got into the room and told us that it was a tragedy and a comedy. It's one of my sad things that the comedies, the Aristotelian, that the poetics didn't that the comedy
missing
one
section
got lost. Burned in Alexandria or wherever it was burned in, or lost. That we don't have that one because it would be sweet. But whatever, we get to make it up now.
Well, speaking of canonical drama and revisiting or mixing things up, can you talk a little bit about the Titus Andronicus Commission?
I mean, I can talk about what I'm, I guess, yeah. I mean, I haven't started. I told them this is one of the, you set boundaries when you do as much as I do. And I told them it's supposed to be done, the first draft, by the fall of 2016. And I said, I'm doing a 24-hour concert. I'm not going to have a draft for you. So I'm not even going to start till after the 24-hour concert. So I'm just in the back of my head right now, my idea is to do the translation. This word has gotten a lot of
the academics.
Everyone's so mad over the word translation. For me, it's like they're paying a bunch of playwrights to study Shakespeare plays. I don't see how anything bad could come out of that. When do playwrights get invited to hang out with Shakespeare? I mean, I've gotten to because I'm an actor, and so I went to school and I trained to be an actor, and I learned the Shakespeare, and I've done all this. I've done a lot of the Shakespeare plays, so I've gotten to do it. But most playwrights don't get to hang out with Shakespeare, other than to see. So to be paid to spend time can only benefit playwriting in America, and also our understanding of Shakespeare. So that's how I view it. And in terms of the translations thing, their ideas, if anything, is archaic, where you wouldn't really be able to hear it because in the moment, because the word doesn't make sense to us, that you find a different word for it. That's their idea. You know, I want to, and I think the different playwrights are going to adhere to different things. I want to keep with the verse. I want to keep, you know, the structure. If there's a reversal, I want to find a word that works with the reversal so that we're not screwing with that. But so that's my idea. Whether or not that ever gets produced, someone has wanted to produce it, but I don't know if I will want it to be produced at this point. You know, I want to write it first and then be able to say, yeah, this should go out into the world. But my real goal is that I wanted to write a revenge tragedy, so I thought I should hang out with one of them. So that's what I'm doing. I'm hanging out with one for a while. I'm going to learn about it and the structure of it, and then I'm going to probably do a play that's inspired by Titus Andronicus as opposed to an adaptation.
Well, given the spectacularly excessive violence of that incredibly popular play, I'm hoping for a full-on radical adaptation. So enough of this translation stuff.
It does kind of need it. There's some, what the youth nowadays say, problematic.
It's problematic.
Things in that play that are hard to sit through at this point. So,
but productively so for a playwright like you. So I hope it's an adaptation and a translation.
Fun. I think there's something to be. The catharsis of revenge tragedy, I think, is interesting, and I think there's something useful about it. So, especially in this day and age. So I don't quite know where my in is, but I'll know in a year.
Well, I want to make sure that we have time for questions from the people in the room, but I have one more for you. You've been a wonderfully sharp critic of the theater industry and institution as it is now. And I know you'll be talking about this with the assembled theater arts students on Friday, but I'm wondering if you can end this part of the discussion by talking about the imperative you've delivered over the years to younger theater and performance artists, that you need to make your own work and make the work you want to make, and whether it happens within the context of the institution as it stands or outside of it.
Yeah, I mean, Micah and I were just talking about this. You know, that you, for years, I spent 7 years wasting my life trying to get auditions in New York City, and I couldn't get in the room. So they always tell you it's very hard to be an actor because you have to audition and you have to win the part, blah, blah, blah. But what they don't tell you is you won't even be able to get in the room. You won't even be able to get the audition. So 7 years I spent trying to get in the room, and I had 2 auditions in 7 years, 2 or 3 auditions. 2 of the parts I got out of those 3 auditions, but it didn't help me get more auditions. So at a certain point I went, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. This whole entire system is built around stopping people from participating. So I realized that, you know, our entire education system, we're always teaching people how to audition, how to submit your plays, how to network, and they put so much emphasis on networking and blah, 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 all this crap. And I just think, no, focus on making your party. Don't try to get invited to somebody else's party. Like, let them have their party. Why do you want to work with the Wooster Group? Let the Wooster Group work with the Wooster Group. They have their party. Their party's going on. You know, you don't have to join it. I used to think, I want to work with the Wooster. Why? I don't want to work. You know, like, go make my own party. So that's what I'm doing. And so far, it's worked really well for me. But,
well, we're very glad you're bringing the party here.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we do with the audience too. It's like it's like inviting everybody to the party instead of making work that is saying no. You know? Which is what most of the work that gets produced in America is. I mean, it really is. It's like the fourth wall's there, and it's like, no, can you afford a ticket? Well, okay. You know, like, we'll open a little door then for you. But that's about, you know, it's deep.
Good. Well, I'm sure there are questions. I just know it. I can feel it. There are questions in the room. We have a mic that can circulate. Jacob has it. jump in.
So is that first question. It's always hard.
Yes.
Hi there, welcome to Iowa City. I'm Kim Mara and I teach in the Theater Arts Department, and we're going to be hosting you on Friday. So we're all looking forward to having you come over there. And unfortunately, a lot of our students are busy in their classes right now. So, repetition, as you said, will be a great place to be. But you talked about creating your own party. Can you say a little bit more about how the party got started? Did it come out of kind of the Ludlum-esque tradition of drag performance art?
Yeah, a little bit. I started off as going to acting school, and then I started writing plays, and then when I realized that it was very difficult to even get in the room, I went to the place where everyone's invited, which was the clubs. Mm-hmm. So I would go to the clubs in New York, and you just have to show up and say, I got something I want to do, and they would say, usually, 90% of the time they'll say, great. You don't even really have to ask permission. You could just stand up and do it. And then if they like it, they'll ask you to come back, and you'll do, and they'll pay you. And so that's what would happen. I would start getting paid $50 to perform at this club, then $100 to perform at that club, and $50 here, and pretty soon I was filling my nights with that kind of work, and I would write these 5-minute monologues or 2-minute songs that would just happen in the club, and the problem was that they always had to be the loudest thing in the room, visually and also just vocally loud, because everyone's there to drink and have a good time and flirt and have sex and all that kind of stuff. So I started to make work that was really loud all the time, and I was going, I really want to make work that's not this loud all the time. My voice was starting to hurt. So plus it was starting to become homogenous in that way. So what I started doing was putting together these performance art concerts in the clubs before the clubs would open. And they were just basement bar clubs, too. It wasn't like the big. I would perform at the Palladium and this and that and the Tunnel and all the stuff. But basically, it was they were small little places like the Pyramid Club and this place called the Slide and the Cock and the Hole. It was like go to the Cock and then slide down the hole. That's why I was always like performing at all these raunchy places, and I really learned a technique there, and oftentimes when I'd be performing, people would be having sex around me, and so, I learned that you have to incorporate, if something is threatening to take the story away from the storyteller, you have to incorporate that threatening thing into the story. And so what ended up happening is the audience became a major part of the performance that I was doing in these places. And then I would start doing these full-length pieces before the clubs would open, and we would run them once a week for 8 months. And some nights I'd have 10 people in the audience, and sometimes I'd have 80, which was the maximum you could have. And then the theater started to get wind of it, and started to invite me, and that's ultimately how it happened. I went to Edinburgh too, and we had a big hit with a show there, and then I got an international career as a result. And then once you have an international career, then people in America pay attention. So.
When was it that you sort of crossed from the gay scene into a more heterogeneous audience? It
was pretty early on. Once I started doing the shows, when I was just doing the numbers, it was all queer. Everybody was queer. But when I started putting the shows together, then immediately I was bringing all different types of people were then invited into the space. Not everyone was brave enough to come.
Right.
But everyone was welcome. And so the only time I perform for kind of an audience of all queers now is in a queer festival, and I don't like it. I don't enjoy performing in the festivals. Usually it means that you're not going to have a sold-out house, because those festivals tend to gear towards an audience that is, I mean, it's so sad. It used to, the queers used to be the Walt Whitman and the real thinkers of the culture, and now they're just consumers. So, it's like, unless I'm RuPaul, unless I'm giving them pop culture, then it's a little harder. So I usually tend to I like audiences that are lots of different types of people, because I can, they teach each other how to listen. So I have this one song where I have a line in it where I'm talking about all the lovers that I've had, that I've had difficult with. This one's done this, and that one's done that, and And one of the lines is, he stuck crystal meth up my ass while I was sleeping. So I say that to an all-queer audience, and everybody laughs. They laugh. It stops the show. They do not stop laughing. It's the funniest thing they've ever heard. And I say it to an all-straight audience, and they all get very concerned for me. Everyone's like, And when they're together, then the queers teach the straight people how to relax. It's okay, I'm alive, it's all right, And the straight people teach the queer people how to, maybe you could recognize that there's some sorrow in this event, So that's why I prefer to perform for the mixed group.
Great. Well, I think we'll give you a mixed group here in Iowa City. And that taking the method of ingesting the crystal meth crops up in here, which I had the pleasure of seeing just last weekend, but we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. I don't want to monopolize Taylor. Who else has a comment or question?
Did you guys ever talk about Brecht?
We talked about Brecht a little bit, but not very much.
Do you have a question about?
Well,
We need to talk in the mic because they're recording.
All right, that's scary, but so can you? I missed your Brecht discussion. So could you just tell me why Brecht is important for you and how you adapt, modify, or queer Brecht potentially?
Well, you don't have to queer Brecht. He already is. It already is queer. That's the great thing about it. I have never adapted anything or translated any of his works. I was just an actor in a piece, and I said yes to it. I get a lot of offers to do roles that have some kind of gender confluence to them. And I usually say no, because I always feel like what the person is trying to do is to take my work and make it their work. And they never know how to do it, so it always waters it down and cheapens it. So I usually say no when somebody's got that idea. But my friend Leah de Bassenet, who's a director, she said she wanted to model this Good Person of Szechuan production around my aesthetic and kind of what I've been doing and stuff. And she always wanted to direct a production of it, and but she didn't want to do it until she knew who her Shente Shuita would be. And so she thought should be me. So I had never done a Brecht before. I'd never done one, and I didn't really know that much about it. I was ashamed to say at the time, so I said, you can't call yourself a theater artist if you're not going to engage in this person's work. So I said yes, and luckily for me, I said yes because it turned out to be a really extraordinary experience, and so now I have this idea that I'm going to do a whole slew more of them. So there's talk about doing a ball, and I'm sure I'll get to Threepenny at some point.
Hi, so I'm Jessica Daly. I'm a student at Grinnell College, which is about an hour from here, and I'm actually directing your play, The Levee, the 10-minute one.
My little 10-minute play.
Yes, as we speak, we're gonna head to rehearsal after this.
Okay.
But so I was, as you were talking about her and absurd realism and sort of the kitchen sink drama. I mean, we had a whole thing building that sink for The Levee. But
that's so funny because people say to me all the time they assume that here is the first first time I've written in the genre. I don't know. It's about the 5th full-length play I have in that genre. So it's not, it's interesting. And this is a little 10-minute play that
Yes.
was my second time experimenting in the form. So.
Yeah. So, well, I was just hoping that you could talk a little bit more about what is absurd realism to you and sort of how that works in contrast with non-realism. And we talked a little bit about Brecht.
Yeah. Well, I would say the Levy is not absurd realism.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, maybe a little bit, but so for me, absurd realism is something that it's silly to even put a word to it, to label it and stuff. But it's something that you could say it's been around for a long time. For me, it's just it's realism, but it's in some ways it's pointing out in naturalism more than realism, because it's taking the things that are actually absurd in our lives that are naturalistic. So an example that I use is the blinds in the house broke, right? Nobody's bothered to fix them. That's something that has happened in my life before, where nobody bothered to fix the blinds. So every day the sun beams in at a certain time, and it's so bright that you wear sunglasses in the house. That's absurd realism, right? And so that's really all I'm trying to do with it. And what I've found is just by saying it, it makes everybody go, oh, I've got to perform something. And I'm like, no, you don't have to do anything more. It's been the challenge in labeling it, is that people suddenly feel like they have to work harder. And you don't have to do anything more. All you have to do is live in the circumstances of the play, and just letting people know that the play is dealing with those heightened moments, those odd, absurd moments. So in The Levy, she's got that moment where she tears her nylons off.
Right.
Like, that's something my friend actually did one time. She got so upset, she started crying. She just tore her nylons off. She just ripped them off. She was so sad. It was like she wanted to hurt herself, but she didn't want to hurt herself. So she hurt her nylons. And so that's realistic. It actually happened, but you put it on a stage, people say you made it up, So that's all it is for me. It's very different from theater of the ridiculous, which is taking those ridiculous moments and stretching them so that you actually see it, so you pay attention to it more. It's like making them a little bit bigger than they normally would be.
So I hate to ask you to be too specific, but this benefits me.
Yeah.
So if The Levy isn't quite absurd realism, even if it has those absurd moments, I'm curious as to how you would categorize it, because it is a realist play. It's fairly naturalistic, but you also have these very shortened, cut-off sentences. They don't use a lot of pronouns in that play. We've noticed. It's not it needed fixing. No, needed fixing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's something that you see sometimes they do it on The Americans, that TV show where the pronouns get dropped and stuff in it, and it's something that a lot of playwrights did, especially in the 90s. A lot of playwrights were writing that way, and this play was written in the 90s. But I grew up in Stockton, and this is where all the Okies went during the Dust Bowl. So we have a little bit of a twang, and we tend to drop our pronouns, but we're not saying them. We're just going, I went to store. So we just swallow it. We're just swallowing it. But people think, playwrights then were like, that means that they're not going to say it. So you can just have them calm down about it. You know what I mean?
That would
it's
be
just
helpful.
if
I can tell them to calm down.
I need to go here. I don't know. It's just like, it's something that you hear in dialogue. I also wrote that play when I was much younger. But it's something that you hear people not saying their pronouns before. It's something that people do when the language is lazier.
Thank you. Oh, that was all very helpful.
Yeah.
I will
It's
stop.
an enunciation thing, not a
Stylistic.
not an intellectual pursuit.
Okay, yes.
I want to hear about your process of sifting through 240 years of poetry and music, and how you did that.
Well, you know, if I had done this show 15 years ago, it would have been a lot harder. I would have had to get a lot of travel grants and travel around to all the libraries and work with musicologists in a major way. And, you know, I would have, before I even began, it would have been a financial burden. But now, most of the universities have their stuff online. A lot of musicologists have stuff online. A lot of amateur musicologists have stuff that they put online and created websites and stuff. So I have found it was pretty easy. You know, I mean, easy is to create a 24-hour show. It was pretty easy. It was hours and hours and hours and hours of my life researching and clicking and researching and reading and clicking. I mean, I would go to the Performing Arts Library in New York, and I would go to various places. I would travel. If I performed in a university, I went to Dartmouth. I went to the library there and went through a lot of their old music books and stuff that they have from the 17. I mean, colonial time stuff, you know. So a lot of the broadsheets and things, I would just like look through it. But specifically, you know, every decade is a different theme, and every decade has to do a little bit with a community that's being built because of a dire circumstance or complicated circumstance. So. So I'm looking for specific songs. You know, I'm looking for songs that I can manipulate to work with what I want to talk about. I don't rewrite the songs. I don't rewrite the lyrics, but that I can frame. You know, and songs that maybe we wouldn't think of as framed one way that we could frame in a certain way, and it would make sense. Like accentuate the positive. You know, we reframe that. We reframe that song when we do it. Well, we've cut it, actually. It's not in the show anymore. But when it was in the show, it was what's the lyric? It's you've got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. So we made it all about the It Gets Better campaign. You know, it's like, don't mess with Mr. In Between, don't worry, it gets better. You know, and taking offense to, oh, things have to be one way or the other. You know, it's positive or negative, don't worry about the in between. You know, so we just kind of frame things like, we just take things because I have an agenda. So it's stuff like that, you know. The 1900s is a decade that is done every single song, or songs that were popular in the Jewish tenement in New York. So one of the things we do is we say, the audience is Eastern Europe. I say, you guys are all Eastern Europe, and the stage is New York City, the Jewish tenement in New York City. And so for every pogrom that happens in Eastern Europe at that time, we have rows of the audience will immigrate to New York City, to the stage. So by the end of the decade, the entire audience is sitting on the stage with us, and we've created a little Jewish tenement. Everyone's squished on the stage together, you know. And meanwhile, we're singing all these songs that were sung in the Jewish tenement. So you know, I'm pick songs specifically that are going to help me tell the story of what the tenement was like, and then they're all surprised that they've got that they're feeling some kind of physical sensation of being squished.
Yeah. I wonder, Taylor, how you're feeling about what 2016 holds as you think about getting to the end of your timeline. Are you like tuned into the radio all the time, hoping somebody puts out something worth dealing with, or are you writing your own things?
The last decade are all originals. So I'm writing 24 original songs, one for every decade, and then we're going to do about 12 of them in the final decade. And it's just me on stage. So at that point, we start with 24 musicians every hour, we lose one, and then the final hour is just me. So the final decade is really about everything that's come before, and about the project, and about the community that we've made, and about where we are in our mental state at that time. I can only guess, but yeah. Gorgeous.
Wonderful.
Are you going to record then?
That's so. Because it's a performance art concert, I don't have to pay songwriting royalties for. over 100 of them are public domain, but 100 songs is a lot. I mean, it could really sink me financially. The entire budget could go to just paying the writers' royalties for all of that. So, but when it's a concert, you don't have to pay. The venue pays a certain fee to ASCAP and the like. So you don't actually have to pay it. But if you record it, you do. So we're figuring out how is that going to work. So we don't know if we're going to actually film it. I don't think, I know I don't want cameras in my face when I'm doing something I've been working on for 5 years. And that the audience has been with us for 5 years, and they're finally, we finally are doing this piece that we've all been building together, and suddenly it becomes about cameras. So that I don't want. But whether or not we revisit it after the 24-hour show and we film every decade and do some kind of thing, I don't know. I mean, we're talking to people and we're seeing, and I have my fingers crossed that something might work out. Yeah. But it's a theater event. It is not a film. It's not TV. It's theater. I'm a theater artist. I don't mind that. I like to watch things. I like to watch live performances filmed and stuff, but so I hope that it happens, and Lincoln Center has filmed a couple of my plays and stuff, and that's really fun to be able to go to Performing Arts Library and see, my little videos of my work and stuff, but it's theater. Yeah.
Can you say something about, sorry, I'm not using the mic, can you say something about where you see queer politics and performance heading in your work?
Where I see queer politics and performance heading? Well, I hope it's heading to a place where I think what's starting to happen now is that the regional theater and the American theater is starting to clue in that the performance art and the presenting world is where it's at. Primarily because that's where the people are who are making their own party, is in that world, and the American theater has gotten stuck in. I mean, not totally. They're trying, but it's a lot of the same old, and so I think what's happening is that it's starting to inspire the American regional theater and those commercial theater giants, and they're starting to blend, and I think that's hopefully going to happen with the queers too, because the queers have their own technique that is extraordinary. They build their own technique. Oftentimes the queers have not been invited to the table. And we're not talking about the gays, we're talking about the queers, right? There's a difference between the gays and the queers. So the queers have not always been invited to the table, and so they've had to develop their own craft. And so when you need them to be in a kitchen sink drama, casting this transgender character, I make it be a transgender actor, 18 years old, it's very hard to cast an 18-year-old who's not transgender in a play. They don't have technique, let alone somebody who is transgender and hasn't been invited to any of the technique classes and experience and the roles, and they haven't been cast in them. The most they probably got cast as Peter Pan, maybe, in junior high, right? So they haven't been really exposed to all of the craft of it. So they've built their own personal craft. They focused on their craft. So they have this really interesting thing that doesn't work well with everyone else. And so my hope is that those queers are able to bring that thing into the mainstream more, to shake up the mainstream, and that they are also able to be invited into the world of craft. Because a lot of the queer performance that I see, it's lacking a kind of lineage of craft. It's lacking a certain amount of rigor and understanding of what has come before it. So that's my hope for both queer art and for also non-queer art, is that everyone gets more invited into each other's space. And I think that's happening.
I appreciate so much that you are talking about making your own work, because I'm always telling my students, make your own work, rather than becoming sort of part of or like selling yourself as a commodity to a kind of exchange market.
Right.
Right.
Let's call it what it is. It's
Right.
participating in the global capitalistic
Yes.
economy
That.
and saying it's art.
Right, that.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you had, I have a couple of my students here with me, and I wondered if you had some more specific advice for students looking to make their own work and looking to sort of branch out and not be a cog in a giant system.
Yeah. I mean, just make. So I learned this from the burlesque performers. I used to do a number and I think, okay, I can't do that number anymore because I did it and the audience saw it, And so next week it's going to be a lot of the same people, and if I do the same number again, it's going to be bad. So maybe I should just not perform next week, or take, do a month off, or blah blah blah, or wait until I've got new material to do. And the burlesque performers, their tradition is do the same number for 20 years, every single night for that same crowd, and it's going to be a little bit different every night, and that's the joy of it. So one of the advice I would give is perform every single night, even if all you have is one piece. But keep performing that one piece until you have something new. It means you got to do double duty. You got to write during the day, create during the day, and then perform at night. If you're a director, direct something, have them performing that thing at night while you're directing something else. So that would be my main advice. The logistical advice is go find some place who's not going to charge you for rent. So bars are really good because they like to, when people come and drink. So come, say you have a slow night. What if I do a show? I'll bring a bunch of people. They'll all drink. I'll get the door. We'll charge everybody $10 for tickets. And we'll get the door, and you get the bar. And usually you can work that negotiation, and you can do stuff like find spaces that aren't the traditional spaces, that don't have the gatekeeping. So this is the phrase that everyone uses in the theater world now, is the gatekeepers. This is the artistic directors that are looking to make sure you went to the right school, or that did the right thing, or know the right people, or are writing the right type of play that they need. And those people are fabulous. I used to hate them until they started inviting me to perform their theaters. And then I was like, oh, they're my best friends. I love them now. So they're not your enemy, they just don't know you yet. And when they get to know you, they may not know the full range of you, and so they may still not know you. So you shouldn't wait around for them to get to know you, because you should just do it. And the more you do, the more that you give them an opportunity to get to know you too. So that's my advice. Thanks.
Wait, Hi, I'm Jen Shook. I'm also a member of the Performance Studies Working Group, and former artistic director with a very small gate, current graduate student, and shadow puppeteer, and an Okie.
Oh my gosh, we might as well just get married.
We might as well, yeah. I'm enjoying this on a number of levels. Happy to have you here. But as a dramaturg director, I always want to know more about people's creative process. And I love the phrase, hang out with Titus Andronicus for a while.
Oh, yeah.
So do you know what that will mean, to hang out with the play?
Yeah, I mean, I've read it already a few times, but I'll read it a bunch more, and I'll just let it, I'll just let it hang out with me. I mean, it's really that simple. I'll ride the subway and I'll think about it. I'll look across the way and see somebody who's sitting there, and I'll go, what would they be like if they were playing, that character? Okay. How would that person look doing it? Or what would happen to that person if their tongue got cut off? And, no, seriously, I'll sit and I'll try to consider those types of things. And then I'll start paying attention to what's happening in the world, and who's enacting revenge tragedy in our culture right now, you know, and there are plenty of people who are doing it, you know. I mean, this guy that just shot up the Planned Parenthood, that's his version of a revenge tragedy, you know. So why is he doing it? And I just start to think about it, and whether or not any of that ends up in the play that I ultimately will create, I don't know, but but you know, Donald Trump is creating a revenge tragedy right now on the national scene. Everything he's doing is about trying to get revenge against somebody who wronged him when he was young and very privileged. Had all that money and all that gift, and still somebody has wronged him. Yeah. You know, and you see him, he's getting back at all those people for wronging him. You know? Okay.
So the people on the subway and on the street and all around you are also part of your ensemble?
Oh yeah.
Love it.
Not in the same way that
Of course.
the people that you'll see on stage. You know.
Hand raised over there. Do we have time? You don't have to go back to the doorway. You can.
You can stand there. And just ask
now
it.
like I was okay.
Now you feel like
I'm
on
like a
stage.
student, so I'm like more curious. I was a little late, so I don't know if you talked about it, but like, was there a moment in your life specifically where you decided like I want to do this for the rest of my life, or did you know it your whole like as growing up?
That's the great tragedy of my life. No, I mean when I was 5, I did my very first. I was in a Christmas pageant, you know, in school, and I clicked.
Yeah. Okay.
And I, you know, I always go back and forth on it is the most ridiculous thing that I based my entire life on a decision I made when I was 5. You know? So I know, but I think that it's so small-minded. It really is, because I find that the thing that saves it is how things started to change, and every time that I'm open to the idea of how I can change as an artist. So when I was young, I wanted, you know, when I was 14, I wanted nothing but to be the MC in cabaret. Right? And then when I was 40, I played the MC or 39, I played the MC in cabaret. And I went, I don't want to do this. Like, I realized I didn't want to do it, and I was doing it, and it was a good production, and it was, you know, it was fun, and the people were nice, but I realized the dreams that you have when you're a kid are not necessarily what you want when you're older. And so it's really, I think, very important for theater artists, because so many of us kind of get the bug when we're young, to stay open to change and to reassess before you commit to a project, to say to yourself, is this a nostalgic choice I'm making, or something that is actually happening because I have a great desire for it?
So there was like some hesitancy with you in just like your pursuit of like playwriting?
What was the first part of that?
Is there like hesitancy? Or hesitancy. Yes. I have this like using it as a sword.
It's the subtitle of this show. Is the useless mic. What playwriting was what?
I was like hesitant for you ever, like so it was. Then you definitely had like.
Playwriting was a little slower. I mean, like when you're an actor, you use a great deal of your sense, the person who you are, that so many other people don't use in the world. So it is a wonderful thing to be an actor, but you're not often asked to use. You're not often. I was trained in a way that when you're an actor, you show up and you do what you're told. It's a little more, you know, militaristic, you know, that like the best way that you can serve the piece is to not impose your vision onto the piece. I've grown up and realized that that's not true for me, and I don't, I like to work with people who, when I say, try this, they try it, but if it doesn't work, ultimately, I don't want them to just do it just because I said try it and do it. I want them to fight me on it, you know, a little bit. So So I prefer actors that have a little. But the playwriting came because I had things I wanted to say, and I felt like I wasn't going to be able to say them as an actor. And you know, hoping for a life of under fives on Law and Order is not a happy life. You know, it really isn't. And that's what the majority of the actors that I know are doing right now. There's so much television, so everyone's working, but they're not happy. Nobody's happy because they don't get to choose the projects, right? So they're just hoping to get that paycheck that will get them to the place where they'll get to choose, they'll get to be the creator of the project later. And it's just, don't waste your time, just do it now.
We want to thank you again so much for this conversation. We look forward to Saturday.
Yeah.
You're watching City Channel 4. On TV, online, on demand, on Facebook, and now on the go on your mobile device.